Well, a very warm welcome once again, guys. Hi, my name is Cassim, and welcome back again to my podcast, Journal Entries. I really, really appreciate it. So, as I said in the previous episode, if you listen to it, um, this episode and the episode previously are kind of unique and special and different to some of the other podcasts that I usually do, in that I'm talking a little bit about shame and I'm talking to you about a workshop that I usually have for workplaces which have predominantly a male cohort and a large cohort of male workers. And really, my job in going to these workplaces is to encourage men to talk about their feelings, to explore what's going on for them psychologically, internally, spiritually. Um, it's really to encourage men to ask for support. And as many of you will remember, on the previous podcast, I said that, look, the vast majority of the time that men spend in their lives is either sleeping or with their colleagues at work or at work. And so the workplace is a great place where if men are struggling with certain things, the people who are going to see it are going to be their co-workers, are going to be HR. So it's a place which I very strongly believe should take its place in trying to support boys and men who may be struggling with their mental health. Now, where we finished off last was I was talking about the fact that, look, when people and kids are born, they are thrust into the world. They um, and they get thrust into all of these different systems, whether it's the family system, the education system, and they didn't get to choose them, but they have to learn to survive. And they have to sometimes survive psychologically, physically. Some of people survive in terms of becoming invisible. But one of the ways in which people survive and they learn that they're going to have to survive and cope in the world is that they learn certain psychological patterns or behaviors. So we left off where I was telling you about transactional analysis. Transactional analysis is a method which is used to analyze this process of transactions in communication with others. It requires us to be aware of how we feel, think, and behave during interactions with others. In other words, one of the things that stops people from connecting, from contact, from being able to be seen, from being able to be recognized and validated is that they shut themselves off. They put guards up. They basically put walls up and don't want to let anybody in. And so, unfortunately, human beings, we are social animals and we want to survive and we want to connect with other people. So relationships are really, really, really important, which does mean that if you are in one of these four positions, which I'm about to talk about, it does kind of leave you in a really, really awkward place. So the four positions that transactional analysis talks about is the I am okay, you're okay position. That position basically says, look, I can make mistakes, you can make mistakes. Okay. I'm not perfect, you're not perfect. I've got strengths, you've got strengths. There are people in the world who are healthy. There are people in life who are unhealthy. You've got yin and yang. You've got darkness and light. You've got positive and negative. In other words, these people live their lives in balance. They're not naive. They understand that, there is going to be ups and downs. There is going to be seasons. This is where most of us we want to be. Um, However, that is not where most of us are because one of the other positions that some of us develop is the I am not okay, you're okay. And in this position, you will tend to find a lot of people who believe in perfectionism. They have low self-esteem. They don't believe in themselves. They have fears around trusting other people. Then you've got the I am okay, you are not okay. And that's where you get a lot of self-blame. This is where you get a lot of people who end up bullying other people. This is where you get people who end up having to control people. This is where prejudice, racism, xenophobia all come from because essentially people learn that, look, anything that threatens my psychological framework or how I view the world is seen as a threat. So people end up living their lives out of fear. They end up reacting instead of responding. They end up defending instead of protecting. They end up not being creative and instead they end up hiding. They don't end up anticipating. Instead, they end up waiting. Instead of growing, they stagnate. Instead of risking, they withdraw. Instead of leading, they end up following. Instead of opening up, they ended up being guarded. Instead of facing, they ended up avoiding. Instead of expressing themselves, they end up suppressing themselves. Instead of owning, they end up blaming. Instead of seeking, they end up settling. Instead of trusting, they end up doubting. Instead of challenging, they end up compliant and complying. Instead of showing strength, they end up masking their vulnerabilities. Instead of connecting, they end up isolating themselves. Instead of learning, they end up judging. Instead of giving, they end up taking. And instead of healing, they end up hurting. Right. I have a philosophy which is that there is two ways in which you can have the biggest building in town. The first way to have the biggest building in town is to build it, to get the resources, you get the money, you get the contractors, the builders, you save the money, you get the loans and you build it. But the second and far much more easier way to get to have the biggest building in town is to destroy every other building in the town. Now, some people will say, well, Casimir, if you destroy every other building, then you have no building. Yes, some people have developed the mindset that if I'm unhappy, then everybody else should be. I would rather have everybody have nothing than I try to go for it. And you see this where people self-sabotage themselves and they'll try to destroy other people. Very skeptical. This is where you get people go into nihilism, right? And then the last position is that I'm not okay, you're not okay. And this is by far the most dangerous because this is where people become suicidal, right? Um, this is where people are nihilistic. This is where people are apathetic. This is where people have lost hope. And that leads to one of the other ways in which we end up operating, which is the parent, adult, and child. Where so the parent is where you live in a psychological mindset or pattern where you are lecturing, judging, and criticizing, where you're giving advice and talking down and taking care of somebody else. The adult is where you're objective and rational. You ask questions or information and you treat other people as equals. And the child is where you're submissive, compliant, you're talked down to. It's all about being playful, impulsive, emotional, and throwing tantrums. And what ends up happening is that some of us, we end up going through these, but only operating in one of them. So we're constantly the parent, we're constantly the adult, we're constantly the child. You know, the child is where you see someone who is a grown man who is stuck in that Peter Pan syndrome, where they don't want to grow up. They're constantly joking around and they're constantly having fun and having banter. But actually, sometimes you do need to become serious and you do need to step into adult. You know, sometimes you may have to go and ask for pay rise, which is where you may have to step into leadership and you actually have to go and talk man to man or woman to woman. But also sometimes you do have to become the parent. Sometimes you do have to sacrifice. Sometimes you do have to make difficult decisions. And the key here is to understand that you want to be able to flip through all three of these positions, whereas some people don't. Some people, when they're talking to their parent, they're always a child and never the adult. And you want to get to a place where sometimes in order to get information and in order to heal intergenerational trauma, you may have to speak to your parents as an adult, not seeing them as a hero and superior to you, which many people do see their parents as infallible, as they've never made any mistakes. Then one of the other things that I wanted to talk about is, you know, some people, one of the ways, if they don't protect themselves because of the families, the systems that they've grown up in, psychologically, what they do is they protect themselves uh, physically, in that they can end up becoming the golden child, the hero, the provider, the clown, the strong one, right? The rebel, the black sheep, the fixer, the invisible one, the nice guy, the protector, the performer, the competitive one, the addict, the loner, the caretaker. And what we end up doing is we end up playing roles. Now, these roles are not who the guy is. These are adaptive strategies to survive the family and cultural and institutions that often don't allow male emotional expressions and vulnerability and authenticity. And what can end up happening is that we stick in those. And that's why I shared with you that parent, adult, and child, in understanding that sometimes you do have to be flexible. Sometimes you do have to shift through these in order to be able to meet your psychological needs. Maslow, and many of you will know Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow said, look, human beings, and I talked a little bit about this in the first part of this, where I said, look, Maslow said that we have these needs that we got to meet. And what I think is really important is to understand that all of us are trying to meet these needs, whether it's the psychological needs, the safety needs, the love and belonging, the self-esteem, or the self-actualization. There's a guy called Tony Robbins who talked about the six human needs. These are Tony Robbins essentially says that everyone meets the first four needs here, which is certainty, variety, significance, love, and connection in some way, even in unhealthy ways. But the last two, which are growth and contribution, are what lead to lasting fulfillment. So certainty, the need for certainty is for safety, is for stability, is for comfort and control. It's where somebody says, I need to feel secure and avoid pain. Variety is the need for change, excitement, challenge, surprise. It's where the person says, I need newness, I need stimulation, I need to feel alive. Then you've got significance. Significance is the need to feel important, to feel special, to feel needed, to feel unique. It's basically where the person says, I matter. Love and connection is the need for communication, for intimacy, and for shared experiences. It's where the person says, I need to feel like I'm bonded to other human being, right? And as I say, Tony Robbins says this is where most of us stop. We will meet these needs in one way or another, whether it's healthy or unhealthy. Um, and depending on the systems that we've been brought up in or the institutions. And then the growth is where we need to develop to stretch, to improve yourself emotionally, spiritually, intellectually. This is where we want to become more. And then the last one, which is contribution, is the need to give beyond ourselves and serve other people, right? It's the need to give and make a difference. Tony Robbins says that most of us never go beyond those four needs. We don't get to growth and contribution. And just going back to when I was talking about significance, because I think significance is really, really important because, you know, insignificance is where people, for example, I meet men who say, well, Kassim, when another man comes near me, I don't like it. I don't like it. And I say to them, get away from me. And it's things like that where for some men, they can't even be around other men because intimacy for them, all they can associate it with is sex. But sex is not intimacy, it's an element of it. Intimacy is looking other people in the face. There's some people who can't hold eye contact. Intimacy is being friends with people and not making it sexual. Intimacy is listening. Intimacy is telling your story. These are all parts of intimacy. And sometimes, unless you tell your story, you'll never be heard, you'll never be seen by people, and you'll end up being invisible. So this leads us to shame because shame is the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that you are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging is what Dr. Brene Brown says. The clinical definition that we have in psychotherapy is that shame is a self-conscious emotion arising from the sense that one is inherently bad, defective, or unworthy, right? And shame is the biggest reason why most boys and men do not ever fulfill their potential and their capacity and are not seen. And they do not fulfill who they are. And they don't have flexibility emotionally, internally, externally. Shame is the most powerful uh, master emotion. It's fear that we're not good enough. Where shame exists, apathy cannot. Shame erodes the very part of us that believes that we are capable of change. Again, is what Dr. Brene Brown says. So here's a question for you. What do you think is the antidote to shame as you're listening to me? The antidote to shame is empathy. If you put shame in a petri dish, it needs three things to grow: secrecy, silence, and judgment. If you want to put the same amount of shame in a petri dish and dose it with empathy, it can't survive, right? When someone meets your shame with non-judgmental compassion, it begins to dissolve. This is why safe relationships, and in my case, therapy and vulnerable conversations are healing. To be able to actually tell your story is really, 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 really empowering, right? One of the other ways in which we can, some of the other antidotes that can work alongside empathy are self-compassionate, learning to talk to yourself with kindness instead of harsh judgment, connection, feeling seen, accepted by others, right? Interrupts a lie that you're unworthy. So that means getting yourself out there, being seen, dressing how you think that you want to dress. That for some people means coming out. For some people, that may mean standing up to your family. For some people, that may mean actually doing something that may be seen girl, maybe seen as girly. Maybe it's ballet. Maybe it's uh, having painting your fingernails. Vulnerability, taking the risk to open up, breaks up shame's power. Truth telling, naming what you feel, right, breaks up shame. It removes the secrecy. Also setting boundaries, knowing what is yours to carry and what isn't yours to carry also helps reduce toxic shame. Reframing, recognizing that mistakes don't define your worth and that you're part of being a human being. Failure, perfectionism, no one is perfect. You don't have to get everything right the first time, the second time, or the third time. You can just keep trying. Don't go for perfection, go for improvement, go for growth, go for doing the best that you can. No one can be perfect all the time. It is absolutely impossible. And that was my story because a huge amount of my life was filled with shame. And this is how I came about starting Male Minds Counseling. I was originally born in Uganda, and my biological dad didn't want anything to do with me. Um, and abandoned me when I was 10 years of age. I was bullied in primary school, bottom set most of my life in school. I've had 28 jobs from cold calling to being an estate. I've worked in Tesco, Strada, Revolutions, Subway, Pizza Hut, Deliveroo. I've worked as a cleaner, right? And then we had the issues around my sexuality and that I was a bisexual man. And then I had to lie about that. And I didn't want to come out of the closet because I come from an Islamic family. Then there was a whole thing with debt, drink driving, prostitution. Well, I had a porn addiction. There was an alcoholic and gambling in my story. So all of this was filled with shame, guilt, and embarrassment. Then I had two suicide attempts. And all of this happened before I was age 24. And that's where I came across a man called Jim Rohn, who said a number of things that changed my life. One of which was he said, if you want things to change, you're going to have to change. For things to get better, you have to get better. Don't wish for less problems, wish for more skills. And then that path led to me working in a school. I ended up then working for the biggest online digital mental health company, overcoming my depression, um, and going and working with an depression and anxiety group as a co-facilitator. That then led to me writing my books. Now, you might be like, well, Kasim, how did that lead to you wanting to do this workshop? Well, 75% of UK suicides are men in the UK. Men are far much more less likely to access talking therapies. Mental health stigma still remains deeply rooted in masculine norms, and employers are uniquely positioned to be able to shift this narrative. The reality is that many men are taught, don't cry, man up, be strong. And the thing is that shame leads to silence, isolation, and internal pressure. Emotional suppression becomes the default coping mechanism for many, many, many men. What does that sound like? When a man is living in shame, he will say things like, I'm just tired. I don't need help. I'll sort it myself. I'm not weak, right? He's going to start missing deadlines. He's going to become irritable, right? He's going to start not turning up. But what really he's saying is when he's saying things like I've not got I've just got a lot going on, what he's saying is that I'm drowning, but I don't want to look weak. When he says I'm fine, what he's really saying is even when I'm not, this is code for don't ask more questions. When he says I'll sort it, what he's really saying is leave it with me, right? it's really saying that I don't want to admit that I'm overwhelmed, confused, or need help. When he says I should have known that, he's saying I feel stupid and exposed. When he says that they always pick favorites here, he's saying what really he's saying is I feel like I'm not good enough and I can't compete. When he says it's just politics, no point trying, what he's really saying is that um, shame is being covered by cynicism to protect me against rejection or failure, right? When he says I don't need feedback, that's just how I am. What he's really saying is I can't risk hearing that I'm not enough, right? That I have to prove myself. When he says it's not that deep, just crack on, he's really deflecting from vulnerability or an emotional response, right? Shame can show up in behaviors at work like overworking to prove your worth, avoiding meetings or people, getting defensive during feedback, taking credit to protect your own reputation, sabotaging others out of quiet envy, withdrawing after making a mistake, masking pain with humor or sarcasm, right? Micromanaging out of insecurity, struggling to delegate, right? If it fails, it's on me, that kind of attitude. So that's part of the reason why I started Male Minds Counseling because I wanted to encourage people, boys and men, to come to therapy. Now, the reality is that a lot of men, as many of you will know, um, don't like coming to therapy. They avoid it. Part of it is the fear of judgment or being seen as weak, the belief that they have to handle it alone, lack of male-friendly spaces or language, cultural and community-based stigma still exists, right? Now, beyond that, before you even get to that, there is an even bigger thing of the fact that just men don't want to talk about their feelings. Why? Because of cultural conditioning and masculine norms. Boys are told to man up. Boys don't cry. There is this massive pressure for boys and men to appear strong and unemotional. Then we've got fear of judgment and rejection. There's a concern about being misunderstood, belittled, or seen as weak. Men talk about their emotions. Then you've got lack of emotional vocabulary. There are a lot of men who actually don't have the language to be able to express themselves, right? Then you've got early childhood socialization. Boys are rewarded for independence and punished for emotional expression. So asking for help is seen by many boys and men as a weakness, not as a strength. We've also got shame and fear of appearing weak, where emotional openness is seen as a failure or inadequacy. And then we've got trauma and emotional shutdown, where past betrayals or violence led to emotional numbness. A lot of people were beaten, right? Then you've got the burden of responsibility. Men feel like they must hold everything together and can't afford to feel. Then you've got poor role models, male role models, and communication models where, for example, friendship often lacks emotional depth. Then you've got the fear of losing control. Many men feel like, Cassim, if I talk about my feelings and I tell people, they're not going to be able to handle it. People are going to be overwhelmed. I'm going to be overwhelmed by the amount of things that are going to come up if I open up. No one has ever actually truly listened to them. So when they've talked about things before in the past, people have dismissed them, right? So a lot of boys and men don't see coming to therapy, coming to see me as a first resort. They see it as the last resort because mental health support is seen as a failure. The other thing is that emotional expression is seen as a threat to identity. I have to be strong, stoicism. And so some people don't want to shift their identity. This is who I am, and I don't want to change it. Then we've also got the influence of media and pop culture, hyper masculine stereotypes and dominant um, media really puts a humongous amount of pressure on boys and men. Then we've got systemic issues of race, class, culture, intersectionality. Some communities rely on emotional toughness for survival. Now, what's the real cost of all of this, boys and men not talking? We see in workplaces increased presenteeism and burnout, decreased productivity, higher start turnover, untapped use of EAPs and mental health benefits. A CIPD survey found that 86% of organizations reported employees working whilst ill in 2018, and that's gone up by 26% since 2010. Right? The productivity losses due to working whilst unwell averages out at about 44 days per employee annually, with just 6.7 days of actual sick leave, right? One in three workers aged 18 to 24 took time off for stress in 2024, compared to 10% of those aged 55 and over. Generation Z and young millennials lose roughly 50 to 60 working work days a year to mental health issues. So that's about one week per month, right? And sectors like finance and law report high mental health related sickness. 17% of finance and insurance workers show burnout symptoms versus 12% across all other factors. And a huge amount of this, and the key drivers are job insecurity, workload pressures, unhelpful sick leave policies, and a culture that rewards being present. And then this costs businesses huge amounts of money, right? You've got 22 billion to start staff turnover, 6 billion to absent team. It's a massive, massive, massive thing. So how do we break it? Since a lot of these boys and men are going to be in our workplace. Well, we can swap the language. Language matters. We can swap mental illness for mental strength. We can promote stories of male resilience through support. So if you are a boss, do you share stories of struggles? Not just professional struggles, but actual personal struggles, right? Maybe you could introduce an anonymous or non-clinical support options, create visible, safe, and support environments. We can also normalize help seeking through leadership examples. We can actively promote EAPs and how to access them. Do you talk about EAPs every Friday? Is there an email that is sent out just reminding everybody, not just a poster up on the wall? Run regular mental health workshops and check-ins. You can have somebody like me come in and talk every month about mental health on a different subject. Encourage peer support and non-judgmental listening, right? One of the other things that you can do as a team is that you can do weekly check-ins where you look at questions in the meetings. Is anyone struggling with anything? Does anyone need any support? Who are strengths and weaknesses? Can people collaborate together instead of working in silos? Confidential suggestion boxes and Q&A forms, posters featuring male mental health quotes. Maybe you can have a designated mental health champion in the workplace. Now, look, I know, and I'm realistic, that many of you are going to be listening and you're going to be saying, Kasim, I have my van, my camper van, and, I have my GT6, I have my a Vivian Westwood necklace. I'm a Chelsea supporter, and I love my Vampire Diaries, or I love my anime, or I love my trainers. But the reality is that things can happen. And some of the pressures that some of us are going to be experiencing might actually come from social media. Some of us may be addicted to social media. And actually, the issues that you're experiencing aren't traumatic, but you've just, instead of being addicted uh, to things like alcohol or weed or ketamine or cocaine, your thing is the internet, TikTok, Snapchat, right? And so we can help you with that at Male Minds Counseling. We can help you tell your story. Maybe you've never had an opportunity to tell your story. And actually, you would just like to, for example, I do what I call an exploratory contract for people who they don't really know what's up with them, but they would just like to sort of have an overview. They just want to recalibrate and just go do sort of an MOT on their life, where you're not coming in to talk about something specific, but we're looking at an overview of what's going on for you. What's your story? Um, are you living with integrity? What are your values? Does your work align with your values? This kind of thing. But also, at Mailman's Counseling, one of the things that we can do is that we can validate you and normalize your story. There's a lot of people out there who have gone through stuff and no one's ever validated them, right? They've never had any privacy to be able to introspect. So if you say to them, why are you doing this job? They're not, honestly, they're just like, I don't know, I just kind of do it. They're not living intentionally. They're just kind of going with the flow. Now, remember, only dead fish go with the flow. One of the things that we can do up for you at Mailman's Counseling is we can give you a space where we can process and then release some of this stuff. We can give you a witness to truly, some people have never really been witnessed. Someone has never really paid attention to them and listened to them and then believed them. And as a consequence, a lot of people don't even think that they have the power. They don't think that they have choice. They think that they're weak. They haven't even realized that they have strengths, that they have autonomy, that they have choice, that they can live their life exactly how they want to live it. No one's ever told them this. In fact, there's a lot of people who blame themselves and don't think that they're worthy, and they do think that a lot of things are their fault. And what I'm here to suggest is that we can look at, is it really your fault? I was at a school and a kid said to me, the reason why my parents divorced was because of me. And I said, why'd you say that? And she said, because if I'd been good and if I'd got good grades, then they wouldn't have argued and then they might have got divorced. And I said to her, I don't think that's how it works, my friend, right? We can look at some of your responses. Maybe you're somebody who gets angry all the time and you don't know why you get angry. You're like, Hassan, I don't know. I just lash out sometimes that I shout at my kids and I can see that they're frightened. I don't really know why I do it. And then I don't really know how to even like deal with that. We have mindfulness, we have breathing exercises, we can look back at your history and explore. We got strategies and tactics that we can employ, but also we can give you the language because you might not even have the language. Right. For a lot of people, their issue is that they are not able to communicate with other people because they get really frustrated. They're like, my missus always saying to me, talk to me, and they don't know how to talk because they don't have the language. They don't know what sadness, they don't know what joy, they don't know what resentment feels like because they don't have the words. And at Mailman's Counseling, one of the things that we can do is we can help you to find that language because your language might be music, it might be painting, it might be dance, it might be writing a song, it might be playing the guitar. We can help you. So, for example, some people actually what they're looking for is a diagnosis that they've got ADHD, that they're neurodivergent. And actually, for some people, it's the word that they're looking for is masking. They've been masking their whole lives and they have no idea. And so at Male Minds Counseling, what we do is we specialize in working with boys and men in Reading. We serve all of Berkshire. And when I say we serve boys and men, this does not mean we don't serve women. We also serve women. So please, we are very much inclusive, culturally aware, masculinity informed. So I am not here to just simply just validate, listen to you. Actually, we want to be productive. We want to figure out ways to move forward. So if you want to contact me, please contact me directly. Um, and I'll see the best way that I can help you. But otherwise, I'm going to stop sharing this and I'm going to bring it back. But yes, so there we go. That is the workshop that I have for workplaces that I wanted to share with you. I hope you found it useful and it's made you think about something. But really, on a serious note, though, as I've been saying, I think it's really, really important, and I think that workplaces take their responsibility in supporting boys and men because workplaces really have a lot of power. They're right at the forefront of face-to-face contact with a lot of boys and men. And so they can help a lot. And I was thinking about this the other day as I was taking a walk, in that it's so interesting that you have all of this safeguarding and all of this support for kids during school and referrals and high school and college and university. But then, it all just disappears after people leave university, if they even get to university, all of that support. And I think really that transition of mental health support and of well-being support should then transfer to workplaces and not just disappear. So that's what I believe. So I know these two have been a bit different, this one and the last one, but as I say, I hope they've been useful. As usual, please like and subscribe. If you are listening to this on Apple or Spotify, please can you like it? Please can you give me 5 stars? If you've got any questions, please email me. But otherwise, thank you so much for listening, and I will speak to you next week. Bye for now.